And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. How you doing? This is Jared Morris. I'll be hosting you on this impromptu episode of the Assembly Call. So I decided that I want to try something a little bit different. I've been writing these blog posts in the mornings over at assemblycall.com. They're called 3-Point Shot, and every morning I try to just go through 3 different points. I started it during the coaching search, and I'd like to continue it as we move forward. I don't know that I will do it every day, but I'm going to try and do it most weekdays, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week, something like that. I think Andy might hop in and do it with me too. But just another way to get some content out there, organize some thoughts about IU basketball as we move forward in this exciting new era with Archie Miller. But I also realize that our audience has always been based on the podcasts that we do and the videos that we do here on YouTube. And so a lot of you maybe don't know that we're posting this content on the blog. And I thought doing it this way, talking about it on a podcast, even reading some portions of the article, would be a good way to get that content out there for those of you who prefer consuming content in that way. And so that's what I'm going to try and do. I would love to get your feedback on this episode if you like this. Certainly, those of you who have my email address, send me an email, or it's jared@assemblycall.com. You can send me an email and let me know if you like it, or just let me know on Twitter @assemblycall. Give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down if you think this is good, a worthwhile addition to our podcast feed, or not. And I'll definitely take that feedback under advisement when I decide if I'm going to do more of this. But I want to talk about the article that I wrote this morning. Obviously, a really important day for Indiana basketball today, as Archie Miller had his press conference. He was announced as Indiana's new basketball coach. I thought he did a great job at the press conference, said all the things that you need to say, had a self-assuredness about him, a calm confidence about him that I think really reassured IU fans, and really, for as much as you can do at a press conference, made you feel good that the right guy was chosen. Now, all that matters, obviously, is winning games and what happens on the court and what happens with the team moving forward. But I think it would be hard to feel better about the choice at this point, and really that's about all that you can ask for. So a lot to like so far with what we've seen from Archie Miller. And, I didn't do as much digging in on him during the coaching search as I did on some other guys. And so I've been spending some time over the past few days since Saturday, really digging in a little bit more and digging into the numbers. And I uncovered 3 particular points this morning that I thought were really, really illuminating, because I think, just looking at the basic KenPom metrics, there's some pretty obvious ways I think that we can expect Archie Miller's Indiana Hoosiers to be different from Tom Crean's Hoosiers. And again, whenever you're looking at metrics from a previous coach's, last gig, Archie Miller was at Dayton, and you're trying to project them forward, you're obviously doing it with the assumption that those trends will continue. Those, footprints of his teams will continue on with the new team. I mean, coaches coach a certain style. They coach a certain way. They emphasize certain things, and that may change on a year-to-year basis based on players. But typically, coaches kind of have a certain profile. And so as we look at what the profile was of Archie Miller's Dayton teams and project that forward to Indiana, it certainly seems, again, if those trends continue, that there are going to be some pretty stark differences. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Indiana is going to be more consistent defensively under Archie Miller. They couldn't have gotten really more inconsistent defensively under Tom Crean, but that really seems to be something Archie Miller is going to focus on. And he talked about today that, Indiana better be a team, the players better be ready to play tough on defense, which was music to the ears of many IU fans. On the flip side, Indiana's probably likely to be less explosive offensively than they were under Tom Crean's offense. But on the other hand, Indiana probably going to turn the ball over less, because Archie Miller's teams did not have the propensity to turn it over as much as Tom Crean's teams did. You can also expect the rebounding to kind of flip. Dayton is a team under Archie Miller that really emphasized defensive rebounding to the point that, a few years they were one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the country. Indiana under Tom Crean, typically better on the offensive glass than on the defensive glass. Dayton, also a team that got to the free throw line much more consistently than Indiana, so that figures to change. But Indiana, again, on the flip side, likely to be a little less efficient with their field goal attempts. That was a hallmark of Tom Crean teams at Indiana. Very, very efficient from a shooting perspective. Their effective field goal percentage always very good. So, you can just look at the basic, just take a snapshot of the team profiles at kenpom.com, and you can come up with those. But what I really wanted to do was dig into a little bit more and analyze a few specific problem areas for Indiana that have really plagued the Hoosiers over the last few years. You'll recognize them immediately because they have been themes on the Assembly Call post-game shows that we do, and see, okay, so that's been a theme for Indiana in kind of a negative way. What did Archie do at Dayton? Is there anything that we can point to say, okay, he's been much better than this. He's shown the ability to lead his teams in these specific ways to better results, or does it look like it'll be more of the same? And so those are the 3 points that I want to go through here. Kind of 3 recurring IU weaknesses. And, I suppose the title of this video, the title of this episode gives it away a little bit. 3 weaknesses that I think the data shows that Archie Miller should, if the trends continue from Dayton, be able to help reverse at Indiana, which, in addition to everything else that we've seen and heard over the last few days, is another reason to be excited about the hire. So let's dive into those. And again, you can see this article if you go to assemblycall.com/3-point shots, and that's all kind of one word, 3, the number 3-point shots. All of the 3-point shot articles that I've been writing are there. So this is the one from March 27th, 2017. So you can find it there. Or if you're listening to this, a few days later and it's, buried on the archive page or whatever, you can just search for the headline, Major IU Weaknesses That Should Improve with Archie Miller, and you'll find it, or go to the show notes for this podcast episode and you'll find it there as well. Okay, so the first one is that it seems that Indiana under Archie Miller should be better in February and March. We know how poor Indiana was in February and March. And in fact, let's start with those numbers first. All right. So here are Indiana's records in February and March from 2012 to 2017. In 2012, Indiana was 10-4, pretty good. In 2013, Indiana was 10-5, pretty good. They won the outright Big Ten title that year. In 2014, Indiana was 4-7. In 2015, Indiana was 4-8. In 2016, Indiana was 9-4, pretty good. Won the outright Big Ten title. In 2017, Indiana was 4-8. So over those 6 seasons, Indiana in February and March, 41-36 for a total or for a winning percentage of 53.2%. And I should say, to try to make the comparison as fair as possible and to account for the fact that it can take a new coach a few years to kind of get his system in place, get his recruits in place. The analysis that I'm doing here that I'm going to talk about looks at the final 4 years of Archie Miller's time at Dayton, so it ignores the first 2 years. And for Indiana, it looks at the final 6 years for Tom Crean's tenure and ignores the first 3 years. I think that's really the most fair way to do it and gives the most accurate reflection of what those particular coaches' programs will look like when they have their full kind of fingerprint on there. So getting back to this, Indiana from 2012 to 2017, 41-36 in the months of February and March, a winning percentage of 53.2%. Which, okay, that's over 50%. Like, that's okay, but you can see the swings, right? So Indiana only had a winning record 3 times during that 6-year span. 2 of those times, they obviously parlayed it into a Big Ten title and a Sweet 16 run, which is very good. But those other seasons, 2014, 2015, and this past season of 2017, Indiana wasn't even close to 500, and that's not good. And the bottoming out of those seasons after really solid starts is a major reason why, to those of us who watched, it really felt like such a slog to get through. Because when the game seemingly meant the most, Indiana was playing its worst basketball of the season, and there wasn't really any middle ground. So, again, in total, Indiana was 53.2% in its February and March games. But it's kind of an important question to ask. All right, well, how did that compare to how they were, kind of the rest of the time? Well, Indiana obviously had a better winning percentage the rest of the time. And that percentage, that winning percentage number is especially not good when you consider that 53.2% winning percentage is actually less than Tom Crean's overall winning percentage at Indiana when you include his first 3 seasons. And those first 3 seasons, Indiana went 28-66, 55.1% overall. So that's a long way of me telling you something you already knew, that Indiana was not very good in February and March over the last 6 seasons. Now, let's contrast that with how Dayton was under Archie Miller. So Dayton overall went 102-36 during Archie Miller's final 4 years at the helm. It's a winning percentage of 73.9%. Obviously, very, very good to win almost 75% of your games. When the pressure ratcheted up in February and March, and the games kind of took on added significance, Archie's teams found roughly the same success. They didn't dip like Tom Crean's teams did in February and March. So here are Dayton's records during those final 2 months. In 2014, 13-3. This includes tournament action, by the way. 2014, 13-3. That's the team for Archie that made the Elite Eight. 2015, 11-5. 2016, 7-5. 2017, 8-3. So you add up those 4 years, that's a record of 39-16, a winning percentage of 70.9%. Again, you contrast that with Indiana's of 53.2%. The difference is stark. So the other thing that you notice is that Dayton had a winning record every season during that time span, right? Their worst record was 7-5 in 2016, still 2 games over 500. And they won nearly the same percentage of games as they did overall, 70.9% to 73.9%. So they were almost the same team, right? And it's important to remember that overall records are typically propped up by a handful of gimme games during the non-conference schedule. Indiana's certainly was, and Dayton, even though they scheduled better in the non-conference, they still had obviously a few gimme games themselves, so that the pre-February, March winning percentage propped up a little bit. So it's really impressive that they were basically the same team in February and March, and they were the rest of the season. So again, I think just when you look at the numbers, based on what Archie Miller did at Dayton, it appears that he has a better grasp, perhaps than Tom Crean did, of how to get your team playing consistently throughout the year and not fading in February and March, especially when things went bad. Because when they struggled a little bit in 2016, they went 7-5. That 2014 team started out kind of rough, but they finished really strong. So that is very encouraging to see. And we will get to point number 2 here in just a second. I do real quick want to let you know about our sponsor for this episode, our other sponsor for this episode, SeatGeek. As you know, buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or show that you want to go to. And none of those older ticket sites seem to want to change that, but SeatGeek is different. They've come along and created an amazing app and website that makes it easier than ever for fans to buy and sell tickets, like those tickets to February and March IU games next year, when we can expect a better performance based on what Archie Miller did at Dayton, right? So SeatGeek, always the first place I go to look for tickets to a game or concert, because everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. They do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do the work, you save the time and money, and best of all, Assembly Call listeners get a $20 rebate off of your first SeatGeek purchase. The way that works is this. To get your $20 rebate, download the SeatGeek app or go to SeatGeek.com, go to the settings tab and click add a promo code and enter the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code ASSEMBLY today. All right, so point number 1. The data suggests that Indiana should be better in February and March under Archie Miller than they were the last 6 years. Obviously a positive sign. Point number 2 is that Indiana fans, based on what Archie Miller did at Dayton, can expect the Hoosiers under Archie Miller to more reliably play at or above expectations. And the data that I used to come to this conclusion, or more hypothesis, I suppose, is the KenPom luck rating. And it's really an interesting rating, and I think its name does it a disservice, calling it luck. Because what the luck rating at KenPom measures is the deviation winning percentage between a team's actual record and their expected record. So every team kind of has an expected record that they're going to do based on the KenPom model. You have that expected record, and then you have what you actually do. And so the luck rating measures kind of that difference between the two. And I could spend an entire podcast episode talking about the luck rating, what its flaws are, because there may be one of the things that the luck rating probably shows is perhaps a blind spot in the data, right? Because if teams are performing different than the expectation, maybe there's something important that the model isn't taking into account. So we could go on and on about that, and why the luck rating in any specific individual season or any kind of snapshot that you look at should be taken with a grain of salt. But for the purposes of this discussion, let's keep things simple, because one thing that we can say about the luck rating, if you give it a broad enough sample size, is that if a team or coach has a consistently strong luck rating season over season, then it's pretty safe to assume that they consistently have their team beating expectations. Conversely, if a team or a coach's luck rating is consistently negative, below expectations, then they consistently have their team performing below expectation. So if you put any stock into the Ken Pom model, and I think you should, then give the luck rating a big enough sample size and it can reveal some pretty important things. So here's an example. Everybody loves Brad Stevens, right? The gold standard by which all Indiana fans measure coaches, even though he's never coached at Indiana. Well, here are Butler's national luck rankings for each season that Brad Stevens was the coach. All right. In 2008, it was plus 0.003. Remember, this is measuring the deviation in winning percentage between a team's actual record and their expected record. So it's plus 0.003. That's 161st in the country. That's roughly in the middle. In 2009, Butler was minus 0.014. That was 205th in the country. So they actually had a negative performance against expectation. 205th is actually less than half. Now look at what happens. 2010 plus 0.033. That's 90th in the country. 2011 plus 0.034. That's 92nd in the country. 2012 plus 0.021. That's 119th in the country. Still above average. 2013 plus 0.088. 13th in the country. So the final 4 years that Brad Stevens was at Butler, his teams all performed fairly well above expectations, and you can kind of see the trend that they were continuing to get better. And that last season, they were one of the best teams in the country at performing above expectations. And that makes sense. I mean, Stevens is a great coach, so it's not surprising that Butler would outperform expectations in 5 of his 6 seasons at the helm. That's what you hope a coach does, take the talent and make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So again, when you see a coach consistently outperforming or underperforming expectations, it's fair to assume that it's probably less about luck, even though that's what the name of the metric is, and more about that coach's ability to win close games, to occasionally beat really good teams, or to not take bad losses, because those can really kill your luck rating. So with that kind of to set the context, let's look at the luck ratings for Archie Miller at Dayton and then for Indiana over the past 6 seasons. So here are the luck ratings for data. In 2014, plus 0.038. That was 93rd in the country. In 2015, plus 0.022. That was 131st in the country. 2016, plus 0.082. That was 27th in the country. Very good. And in 2017, this past season, minus 0.021. That was 235th. So obviously not good. And that number seems a little bit like an outlier. You had 3 seasons that were positive, 1 outstanding in 2016. And that 2017 number, not that great. But now let's look at Indiana's luck ratings over the last 6 seasons. In 2012, Indiana's rating was plus 0.007. That's 153rd, so above average. Pretty good. In 2013, Indiana's luck rating was minus 0.021. That's 238th, well below average. Not good. 2014, minus 0.069, 325th. I believe there are 351 teams in Division I basketball, so that's definitely not good. 2015, minus 0.043. That's 282nd in the country. Not good. 2016, plus 0.000. So they were right there in the middle, 173rd in the country. And this past season, 2017, minus 0.090, 341st in the country. So basically, Indiana's luck rating, their ability to perform at or above expectations, was as bad as their turnover rate, and we know how bad that was. So as you can see from these numbers, Dayton outperformed the luck rating, the Ken Pom expectations 3 of the last 4 years. And obviously all of us as Indiana fans are hoping that the dip in 2017 is more of an anomaly for a young coach in Archie Miller rather than an ominous sign of future decline. But, time will tell. But still, even as bad as Dayton's minus 0.021 luck rating in 2017 was, and it looks even worse in comparison to the other ones, and, compared to the bar that Stevens set at Butler, if we're looking at that, as kind of a standard to live up to, that 2017 luck rating of minus 0.021 would actually be the 3rd best luck rating at Indiana over the past 6 seasons. So that just goes to show you how bad Indiana has been at performing near expectations. Because Indiana has been a program that has consistently performed worse than expected, sometimes much worse, especially if you consider 2014 and 2017. So the bottom line here is that if these trends are any indication, Indiana should more reliably play at or above Ken Pom expectations than what we've seen over the last 6 seasons, which should mean more good wins, because that's how you play above that luck rating. You play above expectations by beating teams maybe you shouldn't. And it should mean fewer bad losses, because that's the way that you perform below expectations, is to lose games that you shouldn't, like Indiana losing to Fort Wayne or Indiana losing at home to Nebraska. Those are major drains on your luck rating. So in review, point number one is that Indiana, based on what Archie Miller did at Dayton, we should expect them to play better in February and March. And number two, if Archie Miller's ability to get Indiana to play above expectations like he did at Dayton holds true, then Indiana should more reliably play at or above expectations, which would also be a very welcome sight for Hoosier fans everywhere. Now let's talk about point number three, the third recurring IU weakness that the data suggests that Archie Miller can help reverse. And that is that Indiana should be a better road team under Archie Miller. And again, going back to point number two, one big way that a team can outperform expectations is by winning difficult road games. Because even good teams are often expected to lose difficult road games or maybe to win them by razor-thin margins. You don't need me to tell you how difficult getting road victories can be. So let's take a look at how Dayton has done in difficult road games over the last 4 seasons and then how Indiana has done. And just, to kind of set the stage here for this analysis, I looked at road wins that are denoted on KenPom as being an A or B difficulty. So every game is rated with an A or a B, and where you place someone matters. So, for instance, this year playing Indiana at Assembly Hall was still an A victory. That's still a tough victory to earn. Playing Indiana at home at your place was a B because Indiana wasn't that good and not that good on the road. And that kind of makes sense, right? So to give you an example, in 2017 for Dayton, they won at UMass, the 157th ranked team in KenPom. That is included because it was a B difficulty. So not a great road win, but still, a tough, worthwhile road win. But the win at Duquesne, and Duquesne was ranked 222nd in the country, that's not included because even a road game at Duquesne is not considered much of an accomplishment. All right. However, any road losses are included because if you lose to a non-A or B team, that's always a bad loss. And Dayton actually took one of those in 2016. So here we go. Here is Dayton's record in A-B road games the last 4 years. In 2014, they were 6-4. In 2015, they were 2-6. In 2016, they were 4-2. That's the year they lost to number 266 LaSalle, a terrible loss. But they also beat the 25th ranked team Vandy, which was an A road win. So a little bit of variance there for Dayton. And then in 2014, this past year, they were 4-4. So over those 4 years, in A-B road games, Dayton was 16-16, a winning percentage of 50%. And at first glance, winning 50% of your road games may not seem all that impressive, but really it is. I mean, remember, these are only the toughest road games that Dayton played during this time frame. Their road record would look better if I included, some of the cupcake road games. Look, I mean, Dayton enjoyed a strong home court advantage. And so when you pair that together, a strong home court advantage and winning half your road games, you get the year in, year out success that Dayton had over the past 4 seasons. I mean, no one's just going to go out unless you're the 76 Hoosiers and win all your road games too. We all know that. You try and win your home games and split on the road. It's exactly what Dayton did for the most part, and that's why they were consistent year in, year out, especially over the last 3 years, competing for Atlantic 10 titles and getting nice seeds in the NCAA tournament. So going to the Indiana side, we know how strong of a home court advantage Indiana has had in recent seasons, and here are the Hoosiers' records in the same A-B road games. So in 2012, Indiana was 5-6. In 2013, Indiana was 6-3. In 2014, Indiana was 2-8. In 2015, Indiana was 2-6. In 2016, Indiana was 4-4. And in 2017, Indiana was 2-9. Man, those 3 bad seasons stick out like sore thumbs there. So for the total, Indiana 21-36 in A-B road games, a winning percentage of 36.8%. Not good, and obviously much worse than what Archie Miller did at Dayton. A couple of things to stand out here. One, Indiana obviously played a lot more tough road games each season by virtue of being in the Big Ten Conference. And that in and of itself could be an adjustment for a young coach like Archie Miller, who has only coached in the Atlantic 10, which is a good league, but nowhere near the top to bottom strength of the Big Ten. So he's got to really be ready for that night in, night out gauntlet on the road in the Big Ten, which we know it is. Second, Indiana's inconsistency in road victories mirrors in many ways its inconsistency in February and March. You saw that the worst seasons from a road perspective were 2014, 15, and 17. That's when Indiana was at their worst in February and March, and that shouldn't come as a surprise because a large proportion of the Hoosiers' tough road games come in February and March because they spend most of November and December fattening up on delicious home cooking, as we know. Third, we once again see Dayton's relative consistency under Miller. 2015 was obviously not good, going 2-6, but that team still, despite going 2-6 in road games, still won enough games to finish tied for second in the Atlantic 10 and make it to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. So even when they were at their worst over these last 4 years, they were still good and salvaged the season, whereas Indiana's bad seasons, when they struggled in February and March and losing road games, they almost completely bottomed out, didn't make the tournament, and everything just went terrible. So the bottom line on this one is that Archie Miller, as I said, is going to need to prepare himself for the unrelenting challenge that is playing on the road in the Big Ten. But his relative success doing so in the Atlantic 10, to me, suggests that he'll at least oversee an improvement from Indiana's inconsistent and overall really unacceptable road record during the past 6 seasons. So again, point number 1, Indiana under Archie Miller should be better in February and March. Point number 2, Indiana under Archie Miller should more reliably play at or above expectations. And point number 3 is that Indiana should be a better road team under Archie Miller. And this isn't just conjecture. I mean, that's what the numbers say. And all that would need to happen for this stuff to come true is for Archie Miller's Indiana teams to play like his Dayton teams. And, we've got, fully a 6-year sample, but really that 4-year sample to look at, where he, kind of had a couple of years to build up his program, and the evidence is pretty strong. And so I think those are 3 more reasons to be excited about the Archie Miller era. And right now in the Archie Miller era, all things seem possible. And that's, that's kind of what makes it pretty exciting right now. And I think why fans should be excited that Fred Glass made the right choice. Because, if you look at this, if Archie can make just modest gains in each of these areas, make Indiana a little better in February and March and get Indiana playing a little closer to expectations, just, middle of the road in terms of expectations. And, if you can win just 45% of your road games, all 3 of those have been really major weak points for Indiana in recent seasons. So just doing those things modestly is going to make Indiana a more consistently good program. But the reason why there is such potential for improvement here is that if Archie can lead a significant turnaround in all 3 of these areas, then watch out. Because if he does, then he may well prove to be the guy that rouses the sleeping Indiana basketball giant, and more importantly, keeps it awake. Because the Indiana basketball giant was woken up in 2012 and 2013. The problem is it went back to sleep. It kind of roused for a little bit again in 2016, but then fell back asleep in 2017. And that's the key, is not just waking it up, but keeping it awake. And Archie Miller, at least based on his track record at Dayton, seems to be the kind of coach who can bring that kind of winning mentality and that kind of consistency to a new program. And that's what we all hope that he will do. All right. Well, thank you for joining me on this new episode of the Assembly Call, and what we'll call it. The blog posts are called 3-Point Shots. Again, if you like this, if you like me, kind of going over these blog posts in an audio format and posting the video here on YouTube, let me know. Tweet me at Assembly Call. Shoot me an email, jared@assemblycall.com. Because if you like these, I would love to spend more time doing it. I don't want to do it, if you don't like it, or you'd rather just go read the blog post. So I'll certainly continue writing the blog posts because it helps me do my research and helps me to organize the thoughts in my mind. And so it's really not too much extra work. Obviously, the time to sit here and record it, but it's not too much extra work to record it once the harder work of doing the research and organizing the thoughts are done. So again, let me know if you like it. Of course, check out SeatGeek, our sponsor for this episode, and check out Crane Credit Union as well. SeatGeek is SeatGeek.com. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and Crane Credit Union is cranecu.org. I hope you will support both of our sponsors. We certainly appreciate them supporting us. And we will have much more content coming for you this week on the Assembly Call, including Assembly Call Radio, which should be coming your way. The live recording will be Thursday night. You can join us at assemblycall.com/live for that. And then the podcast will be posted on Friday, as we always do. All righty. Thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Assembly Call. Take care, everybody. And by the way, thank you to everybody who showed up live. I just saw there were a bunch of you here live, so I appreciate you all being here. And if you could, let me know over on Twitter at Assembly Call if you liked this. Kind of a spur of the moment thing to do it. So if you like it, I'll keep doing it. And if not, no worries. All right, everybody. Time to go to bed.